Thank you. Let's move to the question of language and evolution. I'm referencing your co-author piece with Robert Berwick, Why Only Us, Language and Evolution, where it was argued that given our capability for grammar is genetically programmed and no other species has language, at least no language that's like human language, it stands to reason that language emerged fairly suddenly in one fell swoop because of a random mutation referred to as the gambler's eye view, in contrast to a gene's eye view of evolution. The sudden appearance of language occurred perhaps no more than 80,000 years ago, just before modern humans engaged in an out of Africa dispersion. Given this idea leads to a breakdown of Darwinian evolutionary perspectives on language, critics of this view have posited such evidence such as interbreeding between Neanderthals and humans, as well as research in primatology suggesting some precursors to language exist in other species. Is it possible that language in other species was also the result of a macromutation? And do these examples fill the evolutionary gap to human language?
Well, first of all, we didn't say that language emerged. We said that the computational system that yields the fundamental properties of language emerged basically instantly. Actually, that's a point of logic. It's not even arguable. If you have an infinite recursive capacity, it developed instantly with a single rewiring of the brain, maybe a couple of mutations. You can't do it halfway. I mean, think of your knowledge of arithmetic. Every human infant knows instinctively that the numbers go on forever. They don't stop at 83. Takes a little while for this knowledge to emerge, like a 2-year-old may not exhibit it, but there's no way to learn it. There's no conceivable way to learn. All your experiences with numbers up to a certain point. So the concept that they go on forever has to be internal to you. Okay, that was understood by Darwin and Wallace, who debated how it came about. But that's the computational system of language is kind of like that. We know in the book we discuss what is a plausible computational operation that would yield the basic computational, infinite, unbounded computational structure of language, the simplest computational operation, what we call merge. There's no way that could have half evolved. It's either there or it's not there. Like knowing all the numbers is either there or not there. You can't learn it by learning the numbers up to 7 and then up to 29 and then up to 83 and somehow they go on forever. But the going on forever has to be there at the start. It's no easier to get to that from 7 than it is from 0. Okay. Now the idea of a proto-system of this sort just is meaningless. It's like a proto-system for knowing that the numbers go on forever. Had to happen once. Now, there's nothing there that's at all inconsistent with normal biology. Plenty of things in evolution happen suddenly. So, for example, the fact that we have visual systems. Well, we now know there's a lot of work on their origin. Turns out it all traces back to a certain kind of molecule, a so-called opsin molecule, which converts light into electrical energy, happened to enter a cell by accident. And that's the origin of all visual systems, even probably all systems that use light for internal computation. That couldn't have happened half a time. I mean, the same is true just of the existence of complex organisms. Mm-hmm. The reason that complex organisms exist is because a couple of million years ago, a bacterium swallowed another microorganism. If that hadn't happened, we'd all be bacteria. Okay, but it happened, and that broke some structural boundaries, and it led to the development of eukaryotic cells, which are the basic element of complex life. There are plenty of things like that in biology. So what must have happened somewhere, sometime in the prehistory of modern humans is that some mutations took place which rewired the brain, small rewiring of the brain, so that it had the capacity for the first time to produce an infinite number of hierarchically structured expressions, which then could link to other aspects of human cognition to express thoughts for the first time, maybe the first time in the history of the universe, for all we know, certainly the first time in the history of life on Earth. Well, we can ask when this happened. The evidence, archaeological and fossil evidence, is very limited, but we now have pretty good evidence that it happened roughly 200,000 or 300,000 years ago. Now, the reason is that we now have genomic evidence, which is pretty solid, that humans began to separate from one another at least about 150,000 years ago. And they all share the language faculty. So it must have been before that. That's one piece of evidence. Now, humans appeared on Earth, modern humans, Homo sapiens, seems about 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Before their appearance, there is no evidence in the archaeological record of any symbolic activity. Very marginal things like a scratch on a shell or something like that. But significant symbolic activity doesn't appear before the appearance of humans. It's a fair guess, it's a speculation, but a fair guess that the capacity for complex symbolic expression probably required language. And if so, that would mean that language emerged pretty much along with modern humans and basically never changed. The modern languages have the same fundamental structures and capacities. They're pretty much identical across all languages, including those that separated 150,000 years ago. Now remember that these numbers are almost instants in evolutionary time. This is an eye blink in evolutionary time. 50,000 years sounds like a long time, but not in evolutionary history. It's basically an eye blink. Well, there's lots of other aspects of language beyond the capacity of the combinatorial capacity to create structured expressions. For example, there are words with meanings. Where'd the meanings of the words come from? Nobody has the slightest idea. There's nothing comparable in other organisms. Comparative studies show they're pretty much the same for all humans, slight variations, but nothing comparable in other organisms in rather fundamental ways. Could talk about them if there's time. But where this comes from is a complete mystery. And in fact, there isn't even any way to study it. If we could go back a couple 100,000 years and listen to what's going on, well, we might learn something. But that's just not experimental. It's an experiment you can't carry out. So you try to figure out by indirect means what might have happened. And I think what we're left with as a plausible surmise is that along with the appearance of modern humans came the capacity to create an infinite number of expressions, structured expressions, which could be linked up to the conceptual system to yield articulated thoughts. somewhere along this later sometime came means to take these internal processes and externalize them into one or another sensory motor system, usually sound, but it could be sign, could even be touch. That's about what we know. There's nothing there that raises any question about modern biology, nothing.